I have to eliminate the weeds in my life. If you're going to be fruitful, if you're going to be productive, you not only have to deepen the roots, you got to eliminate the weeds. And this is what margin is all about. What are the weeds in your life? The weeds in your life are anything that hinder or limit or choke your growth, that choke your relationship to Christ, that choke you from continuing to develop. It's interesting that Jesus mentioned 3 varieties of weeds. He says there's the cares and concerns that choke your life. That's worries. He says they get you uptight. That's bills, finances, health, whatever. What do you worry about? And then he says riches. He says actually money can be a weed. Greed can be a weed. Greed can consume your life and choke out the desire. You're so busy making money, so busy trying to make a living, you don't make a life. Now, I've seen people, once they've tasted a little bit of money, they forget their life, they forget their relationships, they forget their spouse, the kids, and they taste it, and all of a sudden it's a real problem for many people. It's a materialistic motive. Now, the Bible says in the book of Peter that we're not to live our lives for what the Bible calls in King James, filthy lucre. He says, because not for what we can get out of it. We serve the Lord because we love the Lord. And if I didn't get anything more from God in my life than he's already given me, I owe him the rest of my life. He's already done more for me than I could ever do. So don't be greedy. Greed is a weed. Then notice it says the third weed is pleasure. The pleasure in life can crowd out. That's chasing the good life when you're always looking for a fun experience. And that's anything, recreation can become a weed in your life. But we're going to go to the river this weekend and we're not going to worship. Thousands of people don't come to church every weekend around the world, millions of people, because they're out recreating. They're wrecking creation in recreation. Now, question, how much effort does it take to grow weeds? 0. You don't have to do anything to grow weeds in your life. Weeds are always a sign of neglect. You hearing me? Weeds are always a sign of neglect. You don't have to cultivate them. In fact, that's the difference between a weed and a vegetable. Vegetable, you have to feed, cultivate, you work on it, and it still dies. But a weed, you don't pay any attention to, and it grows. Weeds are a sign of neglect. When I neglect my quiet time, when I neglect the things that keep me balanced in my life and my relationships, the weeds are choking out my productivity. So, in Luke 14, Jesus gives us the parable of the great feast. He says, there once was a man who was given a great feast, and he invited many people, and when it was time for the feast, he said to his servants to tell his guests to come, everything's ready. But all the guests began to make one excuse after another. And the first one told the servant, I bought a field, I got to go look after it. And please accept my apology. And another one said, I've bought 5 pairs of oxen and I'm on my way to try them out. Please accept my apology. Can't come to the party. And a third guy goes, I've just gotten married. And for that reason, I can't come to your banquet. The servant goes back and he tells his master. The master's furious and he says to the servant, well, then just go out in the street and the alleys and the towns and just bring back everybody. Poor, crippled, blind, homeless, the lame. So soon the servant said, your order's been carried out, but there's room for more. And the master says to the servant, well, go out into the country roads and the lanes and make people come in so that my house will be full. Jesus is given an example in this story. He says we have 3 different excuses that can be weeds in our lives. First guy goes, I bought a field. We got to look at it. That represents the guy who lets his investments choke out the productivity in his life. Is that you? I got so much going on. I got so many irons in the fire, so much happening with my investments. I got to watch my wealth. And after I've reached a certain place in my life, certain financial security, then I'll start serving the Lord. You know what I've discovered is people who wait to retirement to start serving the Lord, when they get to retirement, they're not worth much. You have to have a lifetime of spending serving the Lord to be effective. Second guy says, I bought a pair of oxen. Think about this. I'm on my way to try them out. Now, in those days, oxen were the primary way you build your business. So he's basically saying, my work, my career comes first. Can't serve the Lord right now because of my job. And the third guy says, I just gotten married, and for that reason, I can't come. He's saying there are relationships that are holding me back. Any of these 3, investments, career, relationships can keep me from being in the will of God, can keep me from being productive, can keep me from being fruitful.